Hey, this is Zara at ReviewZoneHD, and I'm bringing you guys a review for Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory. This is the English version of the game, and it's going to be based off my first 20 hours spent with it. It was developed by Idea Factory and CompileHeart, and it was published by NIS, and it's scheduled to release in North America on March 12th. The gameplay is turn-based, but you can move around the battlefield similar to Mugen Souls, which released a few months back. The story is pretty out there. It makes fun of itself and pokes fun at other popular titles. The presentation is wacky and stylish, but is it right for you? Let's find out in the review. The biggest knock against this title is going to be its 3D game world, which looks a bit dated, and a lot of the regular enemies, which look pretty basic. However, the bosses and mini-boss characters look pretty awesome, and the mini cutscenes that play for all of your special moves are really where the graphics take a step up and actually look pretty good. As with most NIS published role-playing games, the 2D story cutscenes are painstakingly detailed and vibrant. The town hub that you visit to buy supplies, take quests, fight in a coliseum, and create new items has a very 80s retro look to it, and the menus also carry that same retro style. I like to point out menus that either look really good or really bad when I'm discussing role-playing games because you spend so much time in them, and I'll have to say that I really love the sharp text and colorful designs of the menus in this title. No complaints there. But going back to the comment about the game world, there are a lot of areas to visit, but it reuses a lot of the old areas for new stages, just with harder enemies placed inside the stage. And since the environment already looks somewhat dull in a lot of the areas, this is a bit of a downer. I have to take my hat off to the developers because they took the standard grinding battles that are generally boring and cookie cutter between most other role-playing games and made them actually fun and worthwhile to do on here. Once you enter a dungeon, you have a special gauge that begins building up during normal battles, and once it reaches a certain point, you can activate strong finishing moves at the end of your combos, or you can drain some or all of the bar to activate super moves that do massive damage, speeding up the entire process of battle itself. To counterbalance this, any enemy inside of a dungeon can go viral, which basically turns a standard enemy into a beefed up, much harder to kill version of themselves. You're also constantly gaining permanent stat boosts for doing almost anything in the game, such as walking around, standing still, jumping, attacking, taking damage, healing, pretty much anything that you would expect to do while playing a role-playing game. There's also an absurd amount of side quests to work on, with plenty of reasons to do them beyond just gaining experience. You can unlock new items and outfits for your characters, which can affect your overall base stats that you're going to need for combat. One aspect that I didn't like, which this goes for pretty much any role-playing game, is that there are certain party members that leave your group and rejoin you frequently, and it doesn't automatically unequip their nice, shiny, new expensive armor and accessories that you may have equipped them with before they left, but they do usually return fairly quickly, so it wasn't a huge frustration. The first 4 hours of the game, which included the prologue, all of Chapter 1, and the beginning of Chapter 2, felt like a warm-up and a tutorial for what was to come. During this time, most enemies hardly scratched you at all, and your party's clearly overpowered. This all changes abruptly towards the end of Chapter 2 when it decides to give you a wake-up call and toss some enemies your way that are more than capable of cleaning house with a short-handed, under-leveled party. Boss fights can take a lot of strategy involving buffing your own party members or debuffing the enemy. Most bosses recover a little HP and guard break after each turn, so your party has to be strong enough to do enough damage to overcome that constant regening of HP. Later in the game, some enemies and bosses can also block your use of special moves and items. Each character in your party can be set up for a specific type of role, such as main healing, damage dealer, EX gauge builder, or special attacks. This is done by equipping different pieces of gear and setting up their combo based off of how you want to use that party member. It's easy to get lost in the menus and the numbers, but if you're familiar with this type of game, almost all of it should be second nature. But for those that don't play these types of games very often, there is plenty of tutorials to get you on your way, as long as you're patient enough to read through them. The cutscenes telling the story take up a vast vast portion of your playtime. It felt like half of this game was built around these long anime cutscenes, so that can be a good or bad thing based off what you want out of a role-playing game. Of course, all the cutscenes can be fast-forwarded through if you just want to focus on the combat and the exploration. I personally didn't get and understand as much of the story since I hadn't played any of the previous titles in this series, but it was still entertaining because of its witty humor and off-the-wall uniqueness. Some of it can be a bit provocative, but it's all in good fun, and I would assume not intended for anything beyond that. There were a few features I didn't take full advantage of, such as sending out scouts to obtain new items and discover new areas for you to explore, but it didn't stop me from fully enjoying every minute of playing this huge game. In fact, my biggest complaint is actually not with the game itself, it's that I don't have more free time to spend with it. If you plan on picking this one up, make sure to set aside a few weeks to play through it. Toss in, it's got some multiple endings with a new Game Plus option, and it's going to be safe to say that you'll have your hands full for a while. If you enjoyed Mugen Souls last year, I'd have to say this is a must-buy, as it feels like a mixture of that title and another great JRPG that I reviewed back in 2011, which is Star Ocean: The Last Hope. Anyways, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and thanks for stopping by.